Viewers, power star Puneeth Rajkumar's death due to cardiac arrest has shocked young India. The actor was a pin-up for healthy living and a poster boy for the fight against heart disease. His workouts were the stuff of legend. Every young man wanted to emulate him, watched his videos closely, and followed his instructions. And of course, Rajkumar, wherever possible, made it a point to counsel his friends and strangers to hit the gymnasium, parks, or a sporting arena to keep themselves in shape. That a champion for a healthy heart has lost his life ostensibly practicing what he preached has renewed a massive nationwide debate. More and more people are demanding to know what it takes to get through life in these fast and furious times. Today we will speak to some of India's leading cardiac experts and get to the heart of the matter, so to speak. I want to open this conversation by beginning first with Dr. Naresh Trehan, Dr. Devi Shetty, Dr. G. Karthikeyan. I want to begin asking you, Dr. Trehan, what are your views on the growing statistical evidence that more and more young people, especially those in their 20s and 30s, are dying of heart trouble in our country?
So Rahul, understanding heart disease is a multifactorial question. The basic thing is, one, that is coming out to be the most important in our population, the Indian population, is the genetics of it. So the first thing we say is, know your genes. So before we go into the genes, you understand that in Western world, the average risk of developing heart disease for the population is about 4 to 5%. In India, there is propensity is to begin with around 10 to 12% of the population will be affected. Then when you go forward, that if one of your parents has heart disease, history of heart disease, then the children will have double the risk of developing heart disease. If, God forbid, both of them have it, then there is even a higher chance that you can develop heart. In addition to that, if there is diabetes in the family, if one of the parents has diabetes, then the children have a 25% chance of developing diabetes. If both of them have it, it will become 50%. So one of the major factors of developing heart disease, in addition to genetics, is the presence of diabetes. Then there are many other factors like the fat in your bloodstream. We talk about the lipids and your propensity for having low density, the proteins and all that. So those are things that are fractionations which we can identify as risk factors. But then stress and pollution are two major factors that have been introduced into the life of our generation and the next generation as they come. So put this all together, what it means is that one must know, no matter how young you are, starting from the age of 20, you must know what your risk factors are, especially if your family has heart disease or your family has diabetes. So once we know the risk factors, we can do some predictive modeling. There are algorithms that have been created by us around the world to say if the following risk factors exist, then the chances of developing heart disease are X. And those people need to be warned that they need to be kept within that space. Now, the other thing is that gymming has become a very fashionable thing to happen, which is fine, very good, we recommend it. But if you are going to do extreme exercise, you must be checked before, because there are many other factors besides blockages in the arteries, like valve disease, like congenital heart disease, like hypertrophic heart disease, in which you can have sudden death. So that's why once we have put somebody through the paces of what they want to do in the gym, we can actually advise them what is safe for them. So it is important that people go for a checkup. Everyone must have a checkup by the age of 30 so that we can map their risk factors and advise them accordingly how to live their life. If they have history of heart disease and diabetes, then it should be before the age of 25.
Dr. Devi Shetty, how do you assess the risk factors? This is an important point. How do you assess them? And when should you assess them?
Rahul, the most important thing is Indians generally, youngsters believe that if they have no chest pain, they have no breathing difficulty, if they can run 10 kilometers without getting breathless, they are fit. But that's the problem, because nearly half the patients who develop heart attack are asymptomatic. They have no symptoms. It's called silent ischemia. So it is very important that every Indian male to think that if they are going for a extreme exercise, extreme sports, it is very important that they have to screen their heart. Very basic tests like echocardiogram, ECGs, and a few other tests like a stress test or a CT angio. All these basic tests can be done without much difficulty. But without that, no Indian should subject himself or herself for an extreme sport. Of course, a family history, diabetes, these things matter. But the most important thing is the data coming from the heart. That is extremely vital before getting into this extreme exercise.
Now, are those people who are perhaps predisposed to sports all through their young life as students, etc., less at risk as they go forward? I mean, look, at some point or the other, we have all been active. We've all played either a game like squash or, an extreme form of hockey, etc. Now, to say that, look, you can't do all of this, that might be a disincentive. Dr. Shetty.
Yeah, Rahul, exercise is a very integral part of life. That's what keeps us healthy. All we are trying to do, say, is that there is something called moderate exercise and something called extreme exercise. That is running on a treadmill with a heart rate of 150. If the heart rate is going to reach 150, 140, if you have a pre-existing disease, you are asking for trouble. The problem is a lot of the patients, if they are told they have a heart problem, they still believe that they can exercise themselves out of the heart problem. Unfortunately, that doesn't work. Extreme exercise doesn't help anyone other than winning the medal. So if your motive is fitness and longevity, extreme exercise is not the solution. Exercise is the solution. People who exercise remain active, alert, their blood pressure is under control, cholesterol gets controlled, heart attack can be postponed virtually long time, virtually indefinitely, and they are a lot more productive. Exercise is very, very important, but we are debating about extreme exercise. Yeah.
This is interesting. Professor Bhargava, let me bring you in. In an image-conscious, social media-obsessed world, body aesthetics has come to play a vital part. It's about your acceptability. Unfortunately, there is this one tendency, and a lot of people go to gyms to look like, their film heroes or heroines, and they want to look a certain type, and then they want to pose on social media. It's all part of a valorization, self-valorization culture. Now, that pushes a lot of people towards extremes. And while there's nothing wrong with that, I mean, how does one balance these?
Well, thank you, Rahul. First of all, my comments as a little disclaimer are as a cardiologist and not as Director General of ICMR.
Right.
Having treated 250,000 patients over the last 30 years at All India Institute of Medical Sciences. So I think the points that have been made for a young heart attack occurring in India, we have to remember statistically that India has a younger population, so you will see more heart attacks in India. That point is never talked about. We are in the habit of creating a fear and paranoia by saying, you have to get yourself all kinds of screening tests done. But most important point to remember that a young adult or a young male, female, 20 to 30 years of age, should know the following. Number one, should know his blood pressure. One reading of blood pressure should be known. Number two, he should know his cholesterol level once. Number three, he should know his blood sugar level. And number four, he should stay miles away from any tobacco use of any kind, and should also know, number four, his weight. And his weight should be very clearly weight in height in centimeters minus 100. So if I'm 5 feet 6 inches, I'm 165 centimeters. So my weight should be 65 kilos. Height in centimeters minus 100. Very simple. So that is the weight we have to maintain. The point is that about exercise. It is very clear, and Dr. Devi Shetty has said that moderate exercise is what needs to be done to prevent heart disease. And moderate exercise means 30 minutes of exercise, 5 days a week, and that is good enough. Now, extreme exercise and the point and the question that you're talking about to become more attractive. You need to build muscles, you need to do a lot of physio, but it has to be a gradual process. Asymptomatic people who do not have symptoms and are exercising to 150, 140 on the treadmill, and if they're asymptomatic, they are absolutely fine. They can gradually scale it up. 120, 130, gradually scale it up over days or months together. But the fact that if you want to do extreme exercise, you need to do a screening scan is incorrect and should not be encouraged. That should not be encouraged. The last point that I want to make is that people are taking all kinds of hormones to build muscles, all kinds of proteins, all kinds of injections, which are also prothrombotic. They can cause clotting of blood. They can cause other problems. They can cause increase of atherosclerosis. Those hormones should be discouraged to build muscles. Muscles should be built only by exercise and diet. That's all. Thanks.
This is important. These are important points. And obviously, I'm going to bring in Dr. Karthikeyan as also, of course, Dr. Seth. Dr. Karthikeyan, I'm not trying to obviously overstress the problem, but a lot of Indians lead very sedentary lives. There is also a lot of pollution. I think it was Dr. Trehan who talked about pollution and the growing impact of that. And this is something that has actually emerged out of nowhere in the last 8 years, or maybe a decade at the very least, at least as a known provocateur. Now, or a trigger. I just want to ask you, sir, when we talk about a lifestyle, sometimes it is difficult to lead the ideal one. Now, in the case of individuals who are working long hours, what are some of the things they must do that will at least allow them to stay healthy, even if it means not being able to physically exercise? What are the 3 or 4 things they need to do?
So people, obviously, if they cannot exercise regularly, if they cannot allocate time specifically for that, they can do things in their everyday life. So if instead of taking the elevator, they could take the stairs, they could just walk to wherever they're going. Eat healthy is something which everybody says, and eat lots of fruit and vegetables. These are some things which can be incorporated into the daily life of everybody. Instead of exercising for 30 minutes in a particular allocated time slot, you can exercise for 10 minutes at a stretch whenever you get time between breaks in your office working hours. So all these things accumulate. So Dr. Bhargav talked about 150 minutes per week. So you can accumulate this over any number of slots that you want. You don't have to do it 30 minutes at a stretch. You could do it 10 minutes at a stretch. So all these things are important. But I just want to add on to what Dr. Bhargav said about the need for testing. So this is something which will deter people from getting into any sort of exercise. First of all, moderate intensity of physical activity has shown in numerous studies to reduce the risk of dying of heart attack. So that is something which you advocate for everybody. So if somebody is absolutely fine, healthy, no risk factors, no hypertension, no diabetes, no family history of heart disease, they can very well go on and do moderate intensity physical activity. When we say moderate intensity physical activity, we mean in general, for most people, moderate intensity physical activity is brisk walking. So you do brisk walking for 30 or 40 minutes a day. That's perfect. So that does not require any prior testing. So that should get out of people's minds, because that makes it, that will deter a lot of people from getting exercise. Indians, on the whole, don't get too much exercise. So I think that is one important point to remember.
One important point. Dr. Seth, as we see an exponential rise in the case of heart attack and strokes, medical fraternity is worried that the caseload, for example, if left unchecked, could potentially overwhelm the Indian healthcare system. Now, what do you believe we should be focusing on when we are trying to orientate our healthcare systems? Also, of course, we've got a wake-up call after COVID-19. So what do you advocate, sir?
So, Rahul, I'm going to address that, and thank you very much for bringing this up. But also prior to that, we still haven't addressed one of the most important questions that everybody's asking. Seemingly fit. He was seemingly fit, or they were seemingly fit.
True.
And there have been a number of instances of seemingly fit, but still having a heart attack. And this happens in our lives as well. So how come a seemingly fit individual have a heart attack? And it's important to understand those aspects. For example, by the way, coronary artery disease, every Indian is like a loaded gun and can have a predisposition to coronary artery disease. That's just by genetics. Now, we have understood the risk factors from other speakers, but 25% of the heart disease, even severe blockages, are asymptomatic. You may not even know that you actually have those blockages and could be exercising with those blockages. So that's the first important point to understand, that not everybody complains of chest discomfort and pain with the blockages. The second important point is that you don't have to have severe blockages to get a heart attack. Even minor blockages of 30 and 40 and 50% can lead to major heart attacks. And that's our concern in the younger individuals who smoke heavily, because those blockages rupture and clot forms inside the artery and suddenly closes the artery completely to create a major heart attack, something which we see so regularly in our daily practice and are salvaging every day by treating and doing angioplasties on these patients to open those arteries up. And thirdly, also, that those who exercise vigorously, strenuously, endurance, can sometimes rupture these plaques and suddenly have a heart attack, even on a 30% blockage. And that is why, when you saw those movies where some, a father listening something from a son or daughter gets stressed and has a severe chest pain, those are the instances of stress, of severe stress producing heart attacks. And finally, one thing people have not understood, and I must emphasize, moderate exercise, as described by my colleagues, helps heart and decreases the risk of heart attack by 20%. That's something which best of the medicines don't do. Yet, severe exercise, heavy exercising, endurance exercise can actually damage the heart as well. Scarring has been noted in the heart. Hypertrophic cardiomyopathy has been noted in the heart. And rare instances of cardiac arrest and arrhythmias have been noted. And that's why you see those situations and instances where a fitness fanatic, someone who was playing football and has been exercising to play football, suddenly actually has a collapse and then has to be resuscitated. So those are important. By the way, when we talk about prevention, I would say that anybody who has a family history of early death in the family, of having had heart attacks, of diabetes and hypertension, should be getting tested by the age of 20. Dr. Devi Shetty is right in saying that we should recommend testing in those who are going to take up severe exercise schedules. They have to be gradual, they have to be moderate, but at any age, even those going to college and saying, I'm going to take up severe exercise sports, should have an echocardiogram done, because it is well recognized that congenital QT prolongations, hypertrophic cardiomyopathy are the causes of death in young people less than 25 years who take up severe endurance sports. And by the way, it's mandatory in the United States for college boys who actually take up college sports and college teams to actually go through these tests. Finally, you asked me about what can be done for all this. This is a huge warning for India. Coronary artery disease has risen in young individuals by 200% over the last 15 to 20 years. We know that we are the heart attack capital of the world. We know that 25% of our heart attacks are happening in less than 40 years of age. And actually, prevention is certainly in our hands mainly. We want to, of course, have anti-tobacco lobbies, clearly. We have to have anti-tobacco laws. We have to have anti-trans fats laws as well. But clearly, if you actually look at the fact that how many people do exercise regularly, when moderate exercise can decrease heart attacks by 25%, then believe you me, I could say it's only not even in our hands, it's on our feet. All we need to do is buy kids, walk regularly. I would say 200 minutes a week, not 150 minutes a week. I'd say 45 minutes a day of brisk exercising or mild jogging or cycling or swimming, aerobic exercises which decrease the incidence of heart attacks, and that's been well demonstrated, and that's as good as you can go. It's in our hands.
Okay, that's interesting.
I'd say in our feet.
I also want to, fair enough, I also want to, Professor Bhargava, I just want to also talk about the importance of sleep. I don't think many people have commented on the importance of rest and sleep. Now, where does this fit in? I've read that yes, the person was very fit, but used to only sleep about 4 or 5 hours because he was also extremely hardworking, or she was extremely hardworking, was someone that was always on the make and was extremely energetic, committed, etc. But look what happened. So where does this fit in? The importance of rest. And taking up on the point you made, I was quite intrigued because in most other sectors, people say prevention is always better than cure. So one of the preventive tools, or we have now several preventive tools like these, echocardiograms, etc., etc. I'm not a doctor, so maybe, there are many more than just these 2 or 3 available to us. Why shouldn't we avail of them if they are these tools which are diagnostic in some ways?
I think regarding the point of sleep, it's very clear that we know that there is central control of the heart. The mind does control the heart. The heart and mind are linked by hormones, are linked by nerves, and are very important. So stress, anxiety, lack of sleep, epidemic of loneliness, lack of communication are all very important. Therefore, yoga, exercise do help in that. And yoga and exercise increase certain hormones in the body, which are endorphins, and they are the good hormones. So we need to increase those, and they contribute immensely to preventing heart disease. And therefore, sleep also, at least 6 hours of good sleep is absolutely essential for anyone. And beyond that is a luxury, and less than that is not acceptable. So that's how I would say in terms of sleep. In terms of the tests, again, we're going round and round in circles regarding tests. I have very clearly said the only tests that we need to do is to test for the risk factors, which is for diabetes, for hypertension, for cholesterol, for your weight. These are very simple to do in a young individual, 20 to 30. He should know his cholesterol number, he should know his blood pressure number once a year, and he should know his blood sugar number. If he is not having any symptoms, if he's doing moderate exercise, he's not obese, and most importantly, 33% of Indians, 1/3, consume tobacco in some form or the other. That is the biggest killer. How it kills. Number one, it increases the plaque. It increases the blockage in the artery. Number two, it increases clot formation in the artery. If it is a normal artery can be blocked by a clot because of tobacco and smoking. A normal artery can be blocked by a clot which has been promoted by smoking or tobacco use.
Okay.
So, and also it also has a harmful effect on the cholesterol. So these are the 3 things. So I would emphasize on tobacco. We can pass it off as the tobacco lobby and anti-tobacco, but I think that is the most important. 33%, 90% of the chewing tobacco in the region is India and Bangladesh alone. 70% of the world of chewing tobacco is India. So we have to consciously stop the usage of tobacco in any form, whether it's chewing tobacco or smoke tobacco, and that will prevent a lot of heart disease, even occurring in normal arteries. Even occurring in normal arteries. So that is important.
Dr. Shetty, finally, and I want to ask you this. Lots of WhatsApps were doing the rounds recently, suggesting that Dr. Shetty had given a series of proclamations. Now, first of all, was this WhatsApp genuine? A, and B, what are some of your tips for people listening in today?
First of all, most of the WhatsApp going around the country with my name are fake.
Okay.
I have disowned it. I haven't given, I think, just one WhatsApp interview, a video interview, they could see me talking.
Yeah.
That's only authentic. My message to everyone is that we are genetically 3 times more vulnerable for heart attack. And just because you are feeling great, feeling fit, doesn't mean anything. Get your figures, get the data, and convince yourself that you are fit. Don't go by what you feel, go by the data.
Go by the data. Finally, Dr. Trehan and Dr. Karthikeyan. Dr. Trehan, prevention better than cure. Go by the data. How do you extract this data? Professor Bhargava has said that go for the most basic, diabetes, cholesterol, weight. These are the risk factors. Do you believe that we need to go beyond these? And if so, at what age?
So, putting it all together, the message is very simple. If you have history in your family of heart disease, of diabetes, you must get your executive checkup by the age of 25. After assessment, one can guide you, the doctor, whether to repeat it in 3 years, 5 years, but to make a personalized plan for each individual that cares to be able to healthily and exercise healthily. The second thing is that for people, if you do not have any risk factors in your family, have the executive health checkup, which has been put together, which will check everything that every speaker has spoken about your stress test, about your cardiogram, echocardiogram, and your blood test, so that you will have a very good idea of where you belong, and the doctor can guide you how often to repeat those tests as we go. By the age of 45, it should definitely be every year, because things do change and you don't want to miss them. It's a simple test, it's quite affordable, and it gives you the assurance that in that year to come, you can exercise the way you have been prescribed, you can do and eat and according to your weight. So this is a very good guideline, predictive model which has been perfected around the world. So there is no mystery to it. 26% of the people who we did executive health checkup on did not know they had hypertension or tendency for hypertension or high blood pressure. Very important risk factor is high blood pressure, because you don't know. And when you describe the type A personality, they are very prone to having spikes in their blood pressure whenever they are either too stressed, too excited, or too angry. So I think that there are guidelines which can be incorporated into your life for safety. There is not only coronary artery disease, there is congenital heart disease where unless you have had an echo, you'll never know whether you have a hole in your heart or whether there is a wrong connection in your heart.
Okay.
You get sick. And then there is, of course, the myocarditis, which has been introduced by COVID. COVID has thrown up another major risk factor. We have documented that people who have serious COVID infections have had 20% of them have shown demonstrated effect on their heart muscle, and high heart rate, irregular heartbeats. So these are all dangerous things which can be prevented if proper care be taken. So my message is very clear. Get yourself checked out at the right time, at the right age, 25 below if you have history, below 30 if you do not have any history of heart disease, and then follow the descriptions of the well-known factors, algorithms that have been created for predictive medicine. By the way, predictive medicine is the most important part that has been introduced now in the last few years, and I think we should all practice it and follow it accordingly, rather than our personal opinions about what test to do or not do.
Okay, Dr. Karthikeyan, your point of view on the predictive medicine, number one, and number two, it's a very important point. The COVID suggests, many studies are suggesting, in fact, I can quote one, The state-run Sri Jayadeva Institute of Cardiovascular Sciences and Research, this is July 2021, found that 26 patients who recovered from COVID-19 had suffered a heart attack 7 to 8 weeks post-recovery. So this is very interesting also. Could you elaborate?
Before we talk about COVID, I think all of us are agreed on one part of the testing that requires identification of risk factors. That is crucial. There are good data to suggest that this benefits people in the long run. There are no data to suggest that you do stress testing routinely in patients who are asymptomatic, or you do CT scans in patients who are asymptomatic, whether they want to do moderate intensity exercise or not. So there are no data, there are no guidelines like that, and that should not be recommended because that would be a big deterrent for people to start exercising. The other thing that we keep talking about, we hear this a lot, that Indians are prone for heart disease. Indians are not genetically prone for heart disease. We are more prone for heart disease because we have more distribution of risk factors. We are more likely to be diabetic. We are more likely to be hypertensive. We are more likely to be sedentary. So a large part of our heart attack risk is explained by conventional risk factors. So instead of focusing on some unknown genetic risk factors, it's better to look at known risk factors and try to control them. So we are all very clear about identifying known risk factors and controlling these risk factors. Investigations, tests for preventing heart disease, preventing heart attacks in the future are not to be done in patients who are asymptomatic. Executive checkups have been given up in most parts of the world because they include stress testing. But as part of the executive checkup, you can do routine testing like measurement of blood pressure, measurement of cholesterol, blood sugar, and things like that, which are beneficial in the long run. So I think the point that needs to be emphasized is that we should not advocate asymptomatic patients, apparently healthy patients, to get healthy people, to get investigations so that in the hope that they will prevent heart attacks. That is absolutely not based on any science so far. So all that we need to do is identify risk factors which can be controlled, which we know about. So I think COVID is something which is evolving. Not much is still known about it. We are still learning about it. So it's premature to talk about whether COVID heart attack is precipitated by COVID or COVID is related in some other way. The data are still not conclusive on that. So it's better not to talk about it.
I must press on because I know quite a few people who have actually suffered COVID and then within a few months of contracting COVID and recovering passed away, ostensibly because of a heart attack. So that's what I'm asking. And some people are also saying that the vaccine could be another agent in this. Is any of this true, at least as far as you're concerned? Or is it just
vaccine, all? So first of all, vaccine is absolutely essential. Any minuscule risks of vaccines are greatly outweighed by the benefits of vaccine. And COVID is known to cause heart disease, and people who already have established heart disease, it may precipitate things. It's a very serious disease. So it is similar to other illnesses which are serious, like influenza in old people. So all these things have been observed before also, because COVID has been such a big it's occurred on a massive scale. It's affected so many people. So we are starting to see this more frequently. So we tend to think that it's something very specific to COVID. It may not be very specific to COVID. So like I said, the jury is still out on this. So we have to wait for more definitive studies. There have been several studies which have tried to look at whether we can do something about preventing, say, blood clots forming after COVID or not. So none of them have been really supportive of using any specific treatment, although we have used so many treatments during this pandemic. But like I said, this is something for a discussion when more data becomes available.
Okay, Dr. Seth, I'm seeing you wanting to come in. Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Sir Rahul, one of the very important aspects I would say to everyone is prevention is better than cure. And while we talk about the risk factors and everybody has emulated them, and I must again stress those risk factors, which is smoking, no, diabetes, better control, hypertension, obesity, get rid of it, hypertension, identify and control, exercise, lose weight, check your cholesterol levels. One of the most important aspects while we emphasizing all this is actually your family history. And we must not forget that. That's the most important risk factor apart from smoking that I identify as creation of heart disease. When we talk about family history, means death or heart attacks or heart disease occurring in your parents or siblings, and parents less than 60 years of age, as I was group it, though male and female are different. And that is very important. And those who have that in their family should not ignore that family history and get themselves checked early. Leave the checks to the cardiologist. Leave the checks, what should be done to the cardiologist. But checkups early in those who've got identify your risk factors. And don't forget your family history. That said, you raised this question about COVID, and we understand less about COVID even now, apart from the thousands and thousands of patients we've occurred. But certainly what we have seen is that when it affects the heart, and it may affect, even mild COVID can affect the heart, and they can present with weakened hearts, they can present with heart rate rhythm disturbances. We certainly are emphasizing to our patients, without adequate knowledge, by the way, to say at least don't exercise in your first 3 months of recovery of COVID, because heart rhythm disturbances have actually occurred, whether linked to severe exercise or not linked to severe exercise. We're saying that moderate level of exercise is what is advised at least a few months after COVID, and gradual return to recovery. Not to frighten them, but nobody should return to extreme exercising and 10-kilometer running soon after recovery from COVID. That is just common sense issue, while much more data has to come out on that.
So I just wanted to ask you, pressing on, how long does the COVID, if at all, impact the heart? Is it going to be sort of a condition that is lifelong, or do the effects on the heart wear away, and is it directly proportional to the severity of the COVID that you've suffered?
A very interesting question, and let's just put this into perspective. There's no question at all that those who've had severe COVID with lung problems and have been on ventilators, in 50% of those, heart has been affected and heart has been the cause of death. However, even with mild COVID, affection at a cellular level has been seen. For example, inflammation of the heart muscle has been noted on MRI scans of even those with mild COVID who've recovered. Whether that mild inflammation will transfer into anything serious in the long run is probably not well understood, but clearly some of those do get heart muscle affected, therefore they get weakness of the heart muscle. Some of those do get increased clotting tendency with blood clotting in the arteries, even with mild COVID, resulting in heart attacks, resulting in strokes, and resulting in pulmonary embolism. And certainly, while there is a recovery, and that is yet not been documented at how many, and COVID does recover, heart muscle which is weakened does recover over a period of 3 to 6 months in approximately 60, 70, 80%. How many remain with residual? And there are going to be some who we have identified clearly in our own practice being directly linked to COVID and not recovering even after a year from the affection of COVID on the heart muscle, called cardiomyopathy, which myocarditis, which is inflammation of the heart muscle, changes into cardiomyopathy without any recovery happening. Now, that has been known not just with COVID, it's been known with viral infection, and viral infections are one of the most important cause of cardiomyopathy, as we call it, or weakening of the heart muscle. What is interesting and should not be forgotten is that we're seeing in our practice a lot of patients who have heart rhythm disturbances, which means that the heart starts going at a faster rate. And that continues to happen for a period of 3 months to 6 months, which is fairly interesting. And by the way, more and more understanding about long-term consequences of COVID have only come in more recent times, when we actually had a great flood of COVID cases. And by the way, the COVID variants have reacted in very different manners to the original virus, because consequences of the variants have been slightly different on a longer term than the original virus itself.
Don't get paranoid. There is no need to be paranoid. Know your risks, and those can easily be determined. We've had 5 experts who've told you how to go about it, follow the advice. I'll leave it at that. Thank you very much.